Hey everybody, welcome to Brit Reacts. You're me, BP1, no BP2. We're here to give you more content. Today I am reacting to 25 common misconceptions about the United States that simply aren't true. So stuff that us Brits think are true, or are something likely, or something that's reported in the media that just simply aren't true. You guys don't do it, or you don't have it, or whatever it may be. So this is from list 25, and we're going to get straight into it. Let's find out.
The United States often draws a lot of flack from the rest of the world for everything.
Flack.
From its foreign policy to the way it runs its domestic affairs. In fact, it seems like there are few things that can divide the world more evenly and more strongly than asking people what their opinion is of the United States. Everyone has an opinion. Even in the same city, you'll meet people who fall on the extreme sides of the spectrum. But what is it exactly that causes America to be so messed up? Even America's own politicians can't seem to stop talking about how messed up things are. Well, today we're going to take a deeper look. Are things really as bad as everyone seems to think they are? I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 common misconceptions about the United States that simply aren't true.
But everything's bad, right? It doesn't matter when you... I reckon you could do a video every single year and someone would say the same comment. This was 5 years ago, and I'm sure Americans would say 5 years ago things were pretty good compared to what they are now. I don't know. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, but it's interesting, isn't it, to think that, you know, we think about our own country. We always think it's bad. Will it ever get good again? Who knows?
And as a very important note, this list was produced by both a United States citizen and 2 European citizens that relocated to the United States. It's written to be as fair as possible.
Go on then.
No, I'm not 2 Europeans. Or am I?
No, you're not.
All right, let's begin with a really common thought. Americans are ignorant about the world. Americans are held to an unrealistic standard. Since the rest of the world watch our movies and listen to our music, they know a lot about our country. But let's be honest, they never studied it. People actually complain that Americans don't even know that Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. But neither does half the United Kingdom, and they're on the same continent. It turns out that all of us are pretty bad at geography. You'd think America would be better at it, however, considering another common thought is that America spends its days spying on everyone. And that's true, but who doesn't? Germany, France, Switzerland, Japan, Iceland, and all the rest of us spy on each other and ourselves. Moving on, America has been called racist.
Well, let's start off with the first one. I mean, geography-wise, I will admit, actually, that is a common conception amongst Brits that Americans aren't as good with the geography, as in, I mean, it's a bit of a slang saying that some Brits say, oh, Americans don't even know that any other country exists, ha ha ha, you know. But, which is obviously a load of rubbish, and it's just, you know, talk. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to deny it. I mean, I've heard it, and I've heard people say it about geography that and maybe not as well diverse. But at the end of the day, America, not on your own, but you're a huge country. You know, your whole of Europe fit inside you practically. So it's, you know, it's a bit mad. So I don't know, but I go with it, and it's a myth, and it's not true. So
please don't take this the wrong way. Racism definitely exists, and it makes the news. But you know what else?
Everywhere,
America also has a vicious media, and all of the world watches it, sometimes more than their own media. So when something super bad happens in other countries, it might not even make the back page. Next, it's a common misconception that Americans don't use public transport. While it's true that we use cars a lot, many regions in America have great public transport.
But we know why.
Or at least just as good as Europe. Besides, what good is a train if nobody can afford it? I'm looking at you, UK.
Yeah, I was going to say. And the funny thing is he said this 5 years ago, and we had stuff come out right now only, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, where someone was saying it was cheaper to fly from London to Scotland. It was like, I don't know, 70 quid or something, than a train ticket that was going to cost them like £160, which I must admit, our train system and the expense of it is literally a joke. I don't know how people train it into London every single day. You know, the expenses of doing that is huge, even with rail cards. It's mad, and he's right to point that out. And has anything happened about it in 5 years? Has it?
Moving on. America does /has /is fill in the blank. America is far from being a unified entity. Each state has its own laws, cultures, and quirks. Some states have
true.
the death penalty.
That is different, yeah.
Some
A
don't.
lot different here.
Some have strict gun laws, and some don't. Some have free college, some don't. Some have tax, and yeah, some don't. So just like you can't say Europe is so-and-so, you can't say the same about the US. As an additional note, the states are far more independent than many of us realize. In fact, every state even has its own military, known as the Guard. Furthermore, some states pass legislation that directly contradicts the federal government. This is because in the US, the federal government is not the highest authority, the states are. To further establish the fact that America isn't a single entity, many believe that Americans only speak one language. But that's no different from the rest of the world. Have you ever been to France, or the UK, or Italy, or how about China? Most of them only speak one language too.
Yeah, I don't think that's
That being said, over 20%
a
of the US
misconception.
is bilingual. Now, let's talk about the military, because people outside the US will preach that America's military does, again, fill in the blank. Nobody is naive enough to think that the US doesn't have selfish interests in mind when it invades a country. There isn't a nation on earth that would do that selflessly. But whenever the bad goes down, it's just as common for other countries to complain that America should do something. On a more or less lighter note...
Yeah, it's true. That is true.
Americans are fat. You ever been to the UK lately?
Well, to be fair, this is funny, because he's calling out the UK a few times, right? So that was a very much a conception, definitely in the early 2000s. Americans are fat, they're large. We TV programs, like if you had little skits about maybe Brits and being all posh and queens and everything else, we would have skits of Americans, whether it was inflatable suits saying I want a cheeseburger and all this lot, right? Whatever. But we are the fattest country in Europe now. We have so much fast food, so much convenience food that is unhealthy. It's not being regulated like it should be, and unfortunately younger people are getting larger, and that's it, and it's a bad way to be, unfortunately. Even I'm starting to put on the old pounds, and I've been a pretty slim guy for all my life, and it's just the quality of food, and if you go down the convenience route, that's what happens.
There are even scandals because obese patients are getting turned down for surgery. Yes, America does have an obesity problem. But not all citizens are involved in it. I am. A big part of the United States is fairly health conscious and is consistently working to help the overweight population better their lives. Thanks, healthy people. And while we aren't perfect, many complain that America is worse than other developed nations in, well, everything. There are many statistics, child mortality, literacy, etc., where the US falls behind countries like Norway and Iceland. But those statistics are based on averages.
I was going to say,
in Norway, most of the 5 million
surely.
inhabitants are rich, white, and Norwegian. If you took a similar sample of rich, white Americans in the US, you would find that the statistics are almost exactly the same. The fact is that the US is hugely diverse, and the American experience is completely different with and without money. Translation? The problem isn't healthcare or education, it's economic inequality, almost exclusively.
Yeah.
And speaking
It's
of
a numbers
inequality,
game
many
as well.
make the simple but powerful assumption that America just isn't safe. This is usually what foreign citizens say until they actually come here. By this same logic, Paris, Brussels, London, Madrid, and almost every other city in Europe is unsafe as well. Yes, there are guns, but most Americans have never seen or heard a gun being fired. In fact, most Swiss citizens are much more familiar with guns.
Wow. Yeah, interesting one, that. Because the funny thing is most of the Brits that I know that have been to America have guns being fired. But then they've gone to big metropolitan areas. And I guess certain cities or certain places are, more susceptible to it. I think, obviously, we don't get that in the UK, unless it's probably gang related and it's in normally London or Manchester, Birmingham, one of the bigger cities. But yeah, I agree with him. I think we do look upon it as a more unsafe country than perhaps our own country because of guns. But then we've had knife crime, and knife mortality rates have been huge. So you could say, just because one fires bullets doesn't mean it's any more dangerous than a knife.
Gunfire than us Americans. All this being said so far, people still expect all Americans to relish in a life of our stereotypes. Guns, fast food, and freedom! What I'm saying is, a lot of the world looks at America as overly patriotic. But here's an honest question. Have you ever met a Russian?
I do.
Australian? A proud member of the UK? There's no shame in having pride in your country.
Absolutely
Us
not.
Americans are definitely patriotic. But so is the rest of the world. As they should be. It's not a crime to be proud of where you came from. But that doesn't...
It's probably better off saying, I think everybody's got their own patriotic people, but we don't all fly a flag outside our house. I've never seen that in any other country I've been in Europe. If I've been, I've been to France, Spain, Italy, most of the countries in Europe, to be fair, and I don't see on the average house any flags anywhere. It's the only US is really the only country I've seen that you can pretty much guarantee down every road there's a US flag flying somewhere, and we just don't get that. So I wouldn't necessarily say patriotism, but more just along the lines of flying the flag more than anything.
Doesn't stop others from thinking we only complain and boast about America whenever we travel abroad. This is largely anecdotal. In America, Americans like to complain
boast about America.
With the rest of us. Only a few of them ever even leave the country, so you're meeting an unrepresentative sample. But in their defense, many times, they're right. Yes, this can hit hard in the pride spot, but maybe Europeans could stand to smile a bit more, right? No? Okay, fine. Back to the apathetic, leave me alone face. By the way, that part was written for our European representative. By our European representative. I love all of you. Anyways, statistics viewed by outsiders show that the U.S. is lagging behind. Similar to topics we've already discussed, there's another factor that we have to take into account. Reporting. Every nation reports its own statistics. This means that making statistical comparisons between two developed nations, like the US and the UK, is an exercise in futility. The data is just too close and won't reveal much except that the US counts people one way and the US counts them another. That still doesn't make this misconception true. Americans are fake. Here's the thing. In Europe, citizens are almost proud of the fact that they're really standoffish. But once you get to know them, they're your friend for life. Well, here's a newsflash. Once you get to know an American, they'll also be your friend for life. The thing is, though, they don't use this as an excuse to be a jerk in the beginning. This list sounds great coming from an American. I was totally the one who should have read this one, but I digress. On a totally different but very popular misconception, Americans are the only ones who call football soccer. Actually, a lot of the world calls it soccer. Even parts of Ireland still call it soccer. Oh, what do I mean by still? I'm glad you asked. It was actually the British who coined the term soccer. The word soccer is an abbreviation of association and first appeared in universities in the 1880s, sometimes using the variant spelled soccer with a K. The word is sometimes credited to Charles Redford Brown, an Oxford University student said to have been fond of shortened forms such as brekkers for breakfast and rugger for rugby football. Britain actually started using the word football in the late 20th century, possibly because people incorrectly saw it as an Americanism. This next one...
Well, sorry. Disagree with you on that one. It's football, okay? Clues in the name. Foot. Ball. Everywhere calls it football apart from America, where you have American football. I think the term soccer is used... I have to use the term soccer when I talk to an American, because then they know what I'm talking about. Because if I say football, they'll just default to say, "Oh yeah, football." No. The real real football, which is but then that's again, this is what it comes down to countries when you're growing up, the association. It's just two different things. But I've never understood why Americans call it football, American football, because you only kick the ball after a touchdown. Most of the game is played hands. So yeah, it's a bit of a bizarre one, but or maybe there was more kicking in the early days. Who knows? Anyway, I'm rambling now. Let's go.
Tristan couldn't believe. Could you not?
No.
I'm learning something. To our American viewers, did you know that people in Europe make fun of you for using air conditioning? Why do they need it?
What?
Why don't they
When
just
have we
leave the window open?
ever done that?
At least in Florida. But here's why they might be joining us soon. During the 2003 European heatwave, 70,000 people died. This was in large part due to the fact that European homes and buildings are not typically equipped with air conditioning.
They're not. We don't have them.
While they laugh at the Americans for this,
Never
summers
laugh at
are going to
Americans.
force them to take appropriate measures, especially since children and the elderly are very susceptible. Again, I stand by mosquitoes. I'm not opening my window in the...
I don't know any Brit that would make fun of that or ever said, "Oh, why have you got air conditioning in your house?" I think it's damn obvious why you've got air conditioning in your house. And yeah, I would love to have air conditioning in my house, especially in the summer months. We don't have it because we've never needed it, but certainly with global warming and the recent years of temperatures have been a lot higher, and yeah, I would love to have it in the
summer.
house.
Winter, absolutely. Open windows. Moving into the top 9. That's a weird number. Top 9. Many parts of the world accuse the United States of accounting for 25% of the world's carbon emissions. Not so nice. But it also accounts for 25% of the world's economic activity. The truth is that several nations, including countries like Canada, have higher per capita emissions than the US.
Right.
Next, let's talk about how the world thinks Americans are ruining English. Actually, both British English and American English have diverged from a common 16th century ancestral standard, and in some ways, American English is closer to the original than British English. For example, American English has, for the most part, retained the language's rotosity, pronunciation of the R in words like hard, while British has, for the most part, dropped it. Furthermore, this shift in British English happened around the time of the American...
That's hard to say. Of all the words he could have said, hard, you very much have to pronounce the R. We pronounce the R in most things, I would say. Again, it depends where you're from. Where I'm from in some of the South, you start to lose maybe some H's. H's get lost. But
American Revolution, when wealthier Londoners wanted to distinguish themselves from the lower classes. This is only one example, but it goes to show that British English is not an unchanging standard any more than American English. On a totally different note, did you know that Americans don't all live in the suburbs? Nope, not true. The fact is that in America, you have plenty of people that live in cities like New York, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, and the list goes on. In fact, several regions of the United States are very European, like the Northeast Corridor, for example. The difference between the U.S. and Europe is that if you want to live in the suburbs in the U.S., you can, but you don't have to. Now, this next one is just...
I'm not quite sure where he's going with that one, but...
Americans are all dumb rednecks. Well, there are certainly Americans who fit this stereotype.
Americans are all dumb rednecks. Where is he getting this conception from? Who did they survey when they asked these people? Did they ask people that have never heard of America, or people that have got a little bit more of common sense, or a little bit more knowledge of the countries?
The vast majority don't. Most Americans live in cities near the coasts. Most of them are educated, and most of them are not very different from Europeans in any significant way. Every country has a less educated populace that they themselves make fun of.
Yeah.
Even sophisticated nations like Sweden and Switzerland. Fair warning, the last 5 on our list get a bit dark and crazy, starting with the idea that America is imperialistic.
Oh.
In many parts of Europe, the United States is seen as an aggressive imperial power, even more so than Russia and China. This is largely because our military presence both in Europe and everywhere else. But in our strong defense, Americans never forced you to watch our movies, quarter our soldiers, obey our laws, or get permission to leave your own countries. It was the Russians that did that, and much, much more. Food for thought, after World War II, the Americans liberated and left. The Russians liberated and stayed. All right, number 4.
That's true. I would say, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing that people would have that conception. I think it's, in a way, it's a good thing. You know, I think it's good to be a power in the world, and you know, being able to support and share that with others. I think that is a good thing. So
sure to be a shocker to a lot of foreigners. Americans, don't actually all walk around with guns. It's just not true.
No.
Except for a few places, the only people you'll ever see carrying guns in America are the police. In fact, you'll see more people walking around with guns in Switzerland than you ever would in America. Okay.
Yeah, this is a hard one to get. Well, obviously not being in or not gone to America. It's a difficult one. It's a very good one actually to talk about, because there's part of me that thinks there is guns. Not everywhere, but there are going to be people walking around that maybe are concealing a weapon. I don't know about, and it's obviously for self-protection. So interesting that how he said it. How he said that most people don't have guns. So I'm really interested in this one. Just as the average American citizen, when you're going out to maybe Walmart or Target or maybe the local mall, what's the deal? How many of you actually have a concealed weapon? Are you allowed to have a concealed weapon whilst you're walking out in that environment? How many people would you say in that environment, of an average of 100, may actually have a concealed weapon? Because he's basically saying that none of them, if you checked 100 people around you, none of them would have a gun on them. And I'm not so sure. That is the misconception that I have, potentially. So do let me know in the comments, because that's a good one.
We admit that, like most stereotypes, there is some truth to this next one, but it's been wildly blown out of proportion.
Go on then.
Americans are all crazy Christian right-wingers. There's something so right about saying it with that accent. Yes, there are a lot of Christians in America, and while some of them are crazy right-wingers, most of them aren't. In fact, if you ever get a chance to go and stay with one of those crazy Christian families, you'll see that most of them are just genuinely sweet people that go to church on Sundays. This next one sounds like a
Yeah, fair
legit
enough.
stand-up joke.
I wouldn't say we all think they're, all think that. I think we all. I say we all. I can't really comment for everybody, but I do think the majority of us do believe, obviously, that you are probably more of a Christian country than we are. We've got a lot more atheists probably in this country, or are more open-minded. But religion's a funny thing, and everyone believes in what they want to believe in and have the right to do so. So,
If you get injured and can't pay for it, you'll just die in the street. Yeah, many people in Europe think this is what happens in America. As with most things that concern
there's a
America,
cost.
They're wrong. You can't be denied emergency medical care in the U.S. That would go against the Hippocratic Oath. The difference is that you get a bill in the mail a few months later. Of course, debt is another issue, but let's get into that right now. Americans are all in debt. Actually, European citizens carry more debt than Americans. The average household debt in the U.S., OECD, is 113% of the household's income. In the UK, it's 156%. In Sweden, 173%. And in Denmark, it's a whopping 305%. So, what are some misconceptions about the U.S. that you'd like cleared up? Or do you live in America and want to put a stereotype to rest? Let us know in the comments below, or tweet your answer to us at List25. And
have I got any in addition? No, not really. Not misconceptions. The only conception I've got is like your movies, American movies, are always the same, and we always have this a little thing where we say, "Oh, we know what's going to happen here." The typical American movie. There's obviously that big love relationship that's going to happen. You've got the guy walking down the street as if he's invincible, Black Hawk Down type stuff. Everything's rosy and amazing in the end. It's that, it's that typical. Any film, you can you start watching it and you go, oh, it's a bit over the top. I think that's the only thing we would say. But that we would say Americans maybe are a bit more over the top than we are. But that's because we're quite a reserved nation, I'd say. After hearing and watching other videos about what you do in American schools around obviously the Star Spangled Banner, we don't do the national anthem here. That doesn't happen. The encouragement of children being outspoken, and not having maybe that, we don't have that in Britain. So we're brought up as a reserved nation. Our parents were reserved, which means onto the kids, and that's just what we are like that in Britain, whereas Americans are very much more, I don't know, liberal, more speak. Why is my dog scratching the carpet? So yeah, there you go. I think maybe there's something there that is a misconception. I don't know. Poppy, stop it. There you go. We are human here at Brit. Yeah, I'm leaving this in. There you go. Maybe I'll get more views if I've got my pooch here. So there you go. There you go. That's my take of listening to 25 common misconceptions about the United States. I'm not so sure on all of those. I don't think they're all true at all. But there are in there, there are a few that he said which probably are misconceptions, and I said those as we went. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for the majority of this. And my little poochie here. We'll be back tomorrow with me and BP2 for another reaction. Until then, it's a goodbye from me. And this one. Bye. I reckon we should do a video of just you. I reckon we'll get more views that way, don't you? Do you think that way? I think I'd want to know what you think.